This is a News Channel 5 Impact 5 special, Autism, Connecting the Pieces.
Good evening and welcome. Here at News Channel 5, we're dedicating a year to reporting about autism, ranging from those on the autism spectrum to the impact autism has on our area in so many different ways. It is the fastest growing developmental disorder in the world. And tonight we're taking a closer look at those in their early 20s and what happens when they age out of our school system. We start with a story about the questions and challenges they and their parents are facing.
You're doing awesome. Keep going, move it. Next one.
Valerie Herskowitz is trying to establish a business making chocolates with her 22-year-old son, Blake.
Good job, Blake.
She's facing the dilemma confronting many parents of children with autism who are becoming adults. There are few programs or opportunities for them.
On a national level, no. On a state level, no. And on a city level, absolutely not.
Herskowitz has been a speech pathologist for more than 30 years, working with youngsters on the autism spectrum. She says as children grow older, resources dry up.
I think once the children reach a certain age, they're I don't want to say forgotten, but they're certainly not emphasized at all. There's just nothing really going on for the adults.
So last year, Herskowitz set up the chocolate spectrum business in her home.
My major purpose is to provide some sort of opportunity for both my son to have a meaningful life and to eventually grow the business so we can employ other individuals on the spectrum.
Blake is on the lower functioning end of the autism spectrum.
What I've taught him to do is he's the mold filler. He's the one who takes the products that we put into the chocolates. He actually can fill up the truffle molds, he can fill the chocolate molds.
He does not speak and he does need 24-hour supervision.
Okie dokie. Come on, Blake, come put him in the freezer.
The sales of the chocolates are small at this point, with part of the profits going to autism charities. Herskowitz is hoping to grow it to be large enough to move out of her kitchen and turn it into a model other small businesses can use for adults with autism.
Probably in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a huge amount of people becoming adults. And I don't think people are far-sighted. I think they're very short-sighted, and they're not really looking at the crises that's going to be coming.
Great mom and a great son joining now with me today on To The Point, the woman you saw in that story, Valerie Herskowitz, and Michelle Rubin, who started the organization Autism After 21. Valerie, we begin with you. A beautiful story.
Oh, thank you.
But what you said at the end bears repeating. The concern, and I hear it so many times, about the crisis when young people age out of the school system. Amplify your thoughts on that.
I think people, they deal with things as they're coming up. They're not looking towards the future. And they're focused on what the problems are now, and they're looking at the young children, and they're looking at all the children that are becoming autistic. But the truth is they're all going to become adults, and it happens much quicker than you think, and there's just a unbelievable shortage of services, both for employment and for just everyday activities.
Ongoing vocational schooling, other opportunities to allow them to perhaps get into the workplace, employers who will take them on in the workplace. So many issues that we really haven't come to grips with, and it's one of the reasons you began Autism After 21, Michelle, because you see this crying issue. And I must confess that early on in our year-long series, naturally we focused at first a lot on children, and they definitely need that focus. But we very quickly realized and got a lot of calls, people saying, as important as that is, what happens, as you said, when they're adults? Talk about the focus you're trying to bring to that and your concerns.
Yeah, you know, when I started Autism After 21, one of our main focuses was going to be educating the community and advocating for what happens when kids leave the school system. And one thing we have found is when I go out to speak to elected officials, business owners, people in the community, they all say, you know, I hear a lot about kids with autism, but I really don't know anything about adults with autism. So I feel like one of the most important things that Autism After 21 has done in the last couple of years is just try to get the word out about the numbers of kids in our school system that are aging out and what their needs are going to be and what kind of effect it has on families and on the entire community, because the numbers are going to be large.
Staggering. We're talking about 1 in 88 children in this country who may develop or have autism, have this developmental disorder. Millions and millions of children here and globally. And what do we do about it? We're going to talk a little more about what you see proactively there and the ongoing concerns. But as part of our discussion, we're going to show a report now featuring your son, Scott, who's being mentored by a friend who's also on the autism spectrum. So let's take a look at that.
You're a hard worker.
Sam Rogerson enjoys his role as an advisor.
Got it. Good job.
He's on the higher end of the autism spectrum, and now the 23-year-old has become a mentor to his friend, Scott Rubin.
It's a really perfect environment for me to working with kids with intellectual disabilities.
Every week, Sam and Scott take the train and then the bus to the all-tag office in Boca Raton. Here they work loading the tags that stores use to detect if clothing is being stolen.
All right, stick it in the box right there. There you go.
With his ability to work and supervise someone with autism, Sam provides a unique view of life on the autism spectrum. He says a big problem is understanding what others are saying. His advice, be direct.
Use small words and break it down into like little sentences and like slow down a little bit.
He says when talking with someone with autism, avoid everyday phrases.
Let's say if it's raining cats and dogs, a lot of people with autism get confused like by that. So the way to like help them describe what it means.
While working with Scott, Sam demonstrates another key to communicating. Stick to the point.
Remember, let all the air out before you close it.
He says it is easy to lose focus.
Let's say, for example, like 10 or 15 minutes, they talk for a long time and they give you some instructions like, Sam, I got instructions for you, number one, and the rest, and then moments later, when it gets too long, it goes blah, 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 and then pretty soon you start feeling like this.
But what he wants most of all is for people to understand that while he may be on the autism spectrum, it does not define him.
I have autism, but that is not who I am.
Michelle Rubin, Autism After 21, a wonderful profile there. Valerie Herskowitz, you've started your own business with your son. Two loving moms who know firsthand on the front lines of loving children and also coping with the challenges of autism. Let's talk about that issue again more in depth after 21. First of all, what do you say to parents who are approaching or at that point? And then I want to talk about what you see as some of the proactive things being done and about the public-private partnerships that we're going to have to look a lot more at in this country. First you, Valerie.
I don't think that parents are often real about their children's abilities, and I think sometimes they think they're going to go to college or there's going to be a job available for them, and then the reality hits and there isn't. There isn't a college program for them, there isn't a job for them. So I think really it's very important to look at what your child is able to do and not just look at their abilities, but look at the environment that they might be in a particular job setting, because for our children, a lot of times it's not a matter of skill, it's a matter of the environment. It's a matter of the sensory issues that happen in a very chaotic work environment. It's the socialization issues that hold them back. And so I think we have to look at all those things and perhaps not only approach employers and potential businesses, but create businesses. As that's what I'd like to do, is create a business and not create it so that the individual with autism has to fit in, but make the business around the individual's needs.
We talk about business. We also talk about the issue that after the school years, you're an adult. Many with children on the autism spectrum, those children will be with them for a lifetime. So there's so many issues that a lot of people tend to say, it's almost overwhelming, where do I start? And you hear that both privately and in government circles. Autism After 21, how are you trying to help shape the conversation, Michelle, about what we proactively need to be doing in terms of partnerships to move forward?
You know, I spend a lot of time meeting one-on-one with business owners and asking them to open up their business to allow a young adult with autism to come in and job train that could eventually lead to gainful employment. And we've had some wonderful successes in the last year with that. And often you find it's just a matter of education about that they do have skills that are available, and when you focus on what their abilities actually are and not so much on what the deficits of having autism are, there's a lot of jobs out there that they have found niches in that they turn out to be amazing employees.
So again, do you both agree that we're going to need a much more robust public-private partnership to make that happen?
Yeah.
But I also think about people, and we're dealing this, and we see this in my family. My family's been touched by autism. My twin sister's son, my nephew, is on the autism spectrum, and she talks very openly and courageously about that. After 21, there's residential needs, whether they're going to stay at home or not. There's concerns about insurance for them. How much are lawmakers listening to you and to you, to the degree that you're reaching out to them and that others who with children on the spectrum are doing so? Are they listening? Are they getting the message? If so, how? If not, why not?
Yeah, I think they are getting the message more than ever. I mean, there's big national efforts through Autism Speaks where they do lobbying efforts for federal legislation, but on a local level, I've spent a lot of time meeting with county commissioners and state representatives and describing what the issues that are going to affect us in the state of Florida. Transportation issues, you mentioned residential issues, like I've met with people in the county about not only the autism population, but just adults with intellectual disabilities. Their housing is going to be a huge problem. A lot of these adults can't live completely independently, so supported living options that are affordable are going to become also a major issue for this area. And it's something that every family is going to have to address at some point.
And ignoring it is simply not an option because of the overwhelming nature of the numbers of people on the autism spectrum.
And we don't really have a lot of different options in the state of Florida.
And what best options, if you were sitting at the table, and in many ways you are, literally and figuratively, to help create that blueprint, what near term, let's say 1 to 5 years, then 5 to 10, how would you both start structuring that blueprint? If lawmakers said, let's begin with a blank slate, or at least build on the one we have, where do we go so that we can give people at home some proactive sense of what that blueprint needs to look like and what you think it may look like?
Well, I think that the current option that we have, which is basically either keep your individual that you love at home, or if there's a group home that is being funded for that individual, which there isn't always, put them there. But I think there's a third option, and the state of Florida hasn't really looked at it, and that's building residential communities, whether they're small or whether they're large, but that meet the needs of individuals such as my son who are going to need a lot of care. I don't really want to put him in a home with 6 people, and there's not going to be enough activities. I want to put him in a community where he has a lot of opportunities for interactions throughout the day. He has opportunities to have gainful and meaningful work experiences. And that's just something that the state of Florida has not been willing to really look at seriously. But we're making headways in that area.
Yeah,
You're nodding your head, talk about that.
Yeah, there's headway coming along. I've also investigated this quite a bit. And I always go back to that we have a wonderful model of senior citizen communities that offer transportation, recreation, dining, residential. That is a wonderful, like, intentional community that this population could also benefit from in a wonderful way.
Do you believe lawmakers are getting it and understanding the enormity of the challenge, not just in South Florida, not just in Florida, but around the country? Because you bring up a model that has developed over decades. So your thoughts on that?
You know, what I think is getting people's attention is that it's almost impossible to not be touched by autism now in some way. It's a friend, it's a coworker, it's a grandchild, it's a family member. So the net of people affected by someone with autism has gotten so wide now that I think it's easily getting more attention. And now the focus on the aging of these children is getting on people's radar screen. So I have high hopes that in the next 5 years that this intentional community idea that a lot of us parents who have young adults already dream about can become a reality.
And the reality is that, as sad as it is that for so many reasons, and scientists are probing those now, that the autism spectrum community is growing, that also translates to, frankly, political power of parents or people whose lives have been touched by that to try and demand those kind of changes.
I think it's going to happen. I just think that we're maybe looking at, I think Michelle and I have children that are older than a lot of other people. But in the next 5 to 8 years, if you look at when the autism epidemic really got going, there's going to be a humongous amount of individuals that are going to become adults in the next 5 to 8 years. And at that point, when you talk about having the real, ability to put groups together of parents, there's going to be a huge group there. And I think that's when we'll have our force and our power to develop these residential communities. So I think it's going to happen.
Well, I appreciate you bringing focus to it. In our year-long effort, we really wanted to make sure we focused on the entire spectrum of needs as well. And while sometimes I come away frustrated thinking we're just chipping away at the surface, it's important to chip away. It's important to put these issues on the table, important to start ringing the bell and making sure lawmakers are listening. You both are doing that, and we thank you for your efforts and your courage in that regard.
Thank you for having us.
putting the focus.
It means an awful lot. We thank you both so much. Thank you for being our guest and a longtime expert in the field of autism. We'll talk about these same types of issues and about the chances of new programs being developed when we return. Welcome back. Joining me now and To the Point, Jack Scott, the head of the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, at Florida Atlantic University. Thank you so much for being our guest. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So many parents have said to me in the last 6-8 months, we're so worried at 21 that people sort of forget about our children after they've aged out of the school system. Candidly and realistically, what does the picture look like to you right now?
There's reason for parents to be worried. The focus has been on younger children with autism and really other disabilities. And as they become bigger, as they get ready to exit school, the programs are not there in sufficient numbers and sufficient quality to help meet the needs of the numbers we have.
CARD, by the way, for our audience, is lauded for its effort to bring together parents who have a lot of questions. I've done stories with parents who said they'd thrown up their hands, went to CARD, you were at least able to guide them towards services and the like. But you would acknowledge, despite that wonderful effort, it's one effort and we need many more like it. So to follow up on the point you made a moment ago, if we don't have enough programs, what does the blueprint need to look like? And if you were designing that picture, where do we need to begin to fill in the gaps in the picture that you acknowledge is not rosy right now?
I think we need a large community-wide study to help look at all of the issues. Children with autism are in the forefront of this, but there are children with other disabilities, intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome, where there's some important issues there as well. I think a major study could help deal with this.
To do what?
To look at where there are gaps. We hear it from parents. I know it. But,
and the biggest gaps are what? I mean, to specify, dig in a little bit.
Getting students employed, getting them placed in real jobs where there's a sensitivity to their special needs.
Biggest, and we did a piece last week, Public's taking on, for instance, some students on the autism spectrum. But again, one effort, we mean many like it. So the number one concern you hear is from parents who say employment opportunities.
Employment, certainly.
What's the next biggest thing after that?
Activities, social activities, a sense of belonging to the community, I think is critically important. And then beyond that, I think the residential options and the problems there, as Michelle and Valerie
Rubin with Autism After 21 and Valerie Herskowitz said.
Yeah, we've got real issues there. Many of these children, as they become older, can live on their own, often when they're matched with someone else where they can kind of share responsibilities, but others will need much more care.
The alarm's been sounded for years. What is your frustration level about what's been done to date, what's not being done? What you've talked about some of the understandable pessimism about where we stand now. Is there anything to be optimistic about in terms of the community, public-private partnerships, lawmakers starting to grasp and move forward, understanding the resources we'll need, or not?
We see your program is helping quite a bit. The advocacy of parents who are stepping forward to talk about these issues very openly, I think, is encouraging. We're seeing legislators who are very sensitive to these issues. Representative Eric Fresen, for example, from the Miami area, has taken this on as a cause.
If you were, and when I say if, you do sit at the tables helping design the blueprints, what would be the key points that you'd want to be a takeaway for public-private partnerships and lawmakers designing a blueprint moving forward?
Yeah. More money, more funding is definitely needed. It is absolutely necessary to have the kinds of things that are necessary. For the vocational evaluations, for the assistance with job placements, coaching. Job coaching is a very important thing for people on the autism spectrum. They need help not only with the technical aspects of the job, but the social, interpersonal aspects of the job. And that takes time. That takes time.
Is Tallahassee listening when it comes to the money? That always seems to be where this conversation, not only in this state, but others, can come to a screeching halt.
I don't know that they're listening as much as they should be. On the local level, we have capacity here. And I think...
When you say capacity?
I think we have capacity
for
improving many of these things. Tallahassee needs to help with job coaching being more readily available through vocational rehabilitation.
And with the residential side of the equation that I thought was a wonderful idea in concept that Michelle was talking about, where we begin to create communities that can cater specifically to these kind of needs. But again, that costs a lot of money, and it's not going to happen overnight.
It is expensive, and not everyone's in favor of those intentional communities, but there need to be an array of options for parents and for the individuals to have as a choice.
Last note, do you at least feel that fundamentally we're moving forward as a community and as people holding the purse strings, understanding that doing nothing simply cannot be an option?
I met with Tana Eberly from our Children's Services Council and Lori George, Dr. Lori George with United Way. We had a very productive meeting looking at these things. And there are new opportunities, especially with the County Commission, and their efforts with disability. I'm extremely encouraged that there may be substantial new funding available to help with exactly the kinds of problems we're talking about, especially in the employment, the vocational placement, and coaching areas. And I'm extremely excited and will be very much involved in that over the next few months and weeks.
You'll promise to come back and give us the
Absolutely.
early sneak peek of what they come up
Absolutely.
with. Jack, we appreciate it very much. We know the tremendous work you all are doing on an issue of such profound community importance and really to our entire nation and world. So thanks for what you're doing at CARD.
Thank you for helping to share the word on this.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more in just a moment. I'd like to offer special thanks for our guests taking their time to share their insights. Also, the Walk Now for Autism Speaks event being held tomorrow morning in downtown West Palm Beach. I'll be there. A lot of people from WPTV News Channel 5. Jack Scott with CARD signaling he'll be there. Lots of folks. Check-in begins at 8:30 at the Meyer Amphitheater with the walk starting at 10. Food, fun activities for children and for young adults, for everyone on the autism spectrum and their families. Join us for this walk to raise money that goes toward research and raising awareness of those on the autism spectrum. And you can find out more about the walk and much more about autism on WPTV.com. Click on our Impact 5 link for stories and news about autism. Again, thank you sincerely for spending time with us this evening. As always, wishing you and yours a great day and a great rest of the weekend.